So, Louise, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. So my name is Louise, Louise Lamidi or Louise Walker Nathenda, depending on what you want to call me. Um, I've got two daughters, both teenagers. I've got a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. I work in medical research, and I've been doing this for, oh God, for a lot of years. And it's sort of, so I kind of juggle the whole sort of motherhood thing and work. I've actually never worked part-time.
Wow.
Um, it's kind of been it's been quite the journey, but yeah, that's essentially me. I live in North London with my husband and my two daughters.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Louise, for volunteering to share your experiences of motherhood. Um, so you have two teenage girls, and to some people that can sound quite scary.
It is quite scary.
So, yeah, talk us through like what were your expectations going into motherhood, and particularly, coming into the teenage years, because some people from like I've got two children, one's 6 and one's 3, and some people from now are kind of dreading those teenage years. So, kind of talk us through what your expectations were and what you're experiencing now.
Sure. So I come from quite a big family. I'm one of 7 children. I'm number two of 7.
Wow.
There is quite a big age gap between myself and number 4, 5, 6, 7. I think I was probably about 10 when I had those younger siblings. So I thought I sort of used to help, changing nappies. I think I'm probably about 14, 15 years older than my youngest brother. So at that time I could change nappies, I could make a bottle, I could wash the bottles, and do a spot of babysitting and all of that sort of stuff. So going into motherhood, I thought it was going to be a walk in the park. I thought, well, I already know how to change nappies, I already know how to kind of look after kids. And we were very excited when my mom was having our younger siblings, because my mom was quite a reader. So she had this book which is called Dr. Spock, which was the manual that everybody used in the 70s and 80s when they had children. And I read it at the age of 9 from cover to cover, and we
Wow.
used to read it all the time. We'd read it and we'd follow the milestones and that sort of thing. So I thought motherhood was going to be a walk in the park. It was, and it was because I sort of already knew what to do. However, nothing prepares you for the sleepless nights. Like, that was a bit of motherhood that I had no idea happened, because obviously the babies never slept with us.
Yeah.
So that in itself was a shock, a huge shock to the system. When we were sort of able to sort of get over that, then it sort of became easier again, easier, not easy, but easier again.
Yeah.
And I remember my sister-in-law saying to me once saying to me that um I think I talked about my daughter wanting to sleep in my bed, and she said, "Oh, Louise, you want to enjoy it while you can, because when they become teenagers, they're not going to want to sleep in your bed unless it's a toss up between your bed and the bathtub." Literally, that actually happened. That actually happened. And she's like, "Look, you enjoy it while it lasts. It's not going to be forever."
Yeah.
Um, Becoming a mom of teenagers, it kind of creeps up on you. Like, what one day they're happy to hold your hand, and the next day you're crossing the street and you're looking for their hand where it should be. They're folding it because they're like, "I'm not going to hold your hand," and that's a shock. I mean,
Yeah.
that happens from when they're like 9 or 10, just as they're coming to year 6. And then it's downhill. No, I'm just joking. It sort of it becomes progressively more different from the childhood year. They want to be independent. They want to do things on their own, but then they can't, because they're not, like, the teenage brain is not fully functional. It's not fully formed.
Yeah.
So the decision making skills are not quite there, but they want to make all the decisions by themselves, and then there's the mood swings, and I have to wake up every morning and wonder which child has gotten out of bed. Is it the angry child or is it the happy child? So it's kind of balancing that, but it's also sort of, as a parent, finding the balance so that even if they're in a bad mood, you don't sort of add to it, or
Yeah.
worse. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So, how would you say that your own upbringing has fed into the way you parent your children?
I think everything. My parents got divorced when I was quite young. My parents got divorced when I was about 4, and then my mom remarried again, hence the other siblings. But
Right.
but my both of my parents kind of agreed on the same thing, which was they wanted their kids to be very independent.
Mm,
So they raise independent children, and I feel that sometimes sometimes I might sort of expect, and I think I probably sort of expect too much of my children sometimes. Like I just expect them to be able to do XYZ, and of course they can't do XYZ because they're 14 or they're 13, or they're not old enough to do it. But then I think, oh, but when I was your age I did it. But yeah,
yeah,
I did it out of necessity, and probably the environment that I grew up in as well.
yeah.
um with a lot of times I've had to step back, and I think also the way my husband was brought up was quite different. Whereas I was brought up to be very, very independent,
Mm,
he wasn't brought up to be that independent.
mm,
So sometimes I always feel, oh, catch up, catch up. You're slacking, you're slacking, because I expect that my kid should be independent and he should be reinforcing, that. And
yeah.
it's perhaps not the right way, all the time.
So, how do you kind of develop y- like a cohesive approach, like where you've come from very different backgrounds? Like, did you going into parenting, did you both discuss this is this is the type of parents we want to be, this is the upbringing we want our kids to have?
Well, to be honest with you, we've been married for 19 years, but we didn't actually really discuss exactly the sort of parents we were going to be. I think
Yeah,
I sort of felt, I think I erroneously thought that because we both came from African backgrounds, we would have the same sort of experience, or the same, at least the same sort of narrative. And
mm,
it wasn't necessarily that. We didn't. I mean, I came from a family where I wasn't smacked at all.
right.
Um, and it was some of the punishments I got, I look back and I was like, oh gosh, that was so ridiculous. Like my mom would say, she'd say, right, because when my mom would come back from work, we'd all go into her bedroom, we sit on her bed, we talk to her about our day and all of that. And
Oh,
that was sort of our bonding time every single day. But like if you did something really bad, she'd say, right, this evening you're not allowed to come into my room. You're going to wash the dishes or something. And then you'd hear everybody in her room laughing and having fun. And you'd be like the stepsister or something in the kitchen, like the Cinderella. But that was our currency. That was our,
yeah.
and you knew that it was a big deal, that you wanted to be with the family, talking. And after dinner we'd all sort of migrate to her room, and then we'd just kind of talk, and then everybody would go to bed. It would probably for like 30 minutes to an hour, but it was a big deal not to be part of that
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah, but I look back now and I think, well, why was I so upset at not being allowed to go into my mom's room? But I understand at the time it was important. So I came from that sort of background. He came from a background where they were, they were punished, they were smacked from time to time. I mean, it wasn't a continuous thing, but they were smacked from time to time. But but what we both decided was that we weren't going to smack our kids, and that was one thing that we had both decided, that we wouldn't smack them. But other than that, we kind of didn't really decide on what sort of parents we wanted to be, and we kind of winged it, if you like. We just kind of, we'd get to a bridge and we'd say, okay, we're going to do this or do that, and then we'd sort of cross it and sort of navigate it as we went along.
Yeah, yeah. So both coming from African backgrounds, like, do you feel that you've steered your children like towards being really academic, or have you allowed them to kind of express their creativity?
I would say both. I would say
Yeah.
both. Probably more on the academic side. Like both of my parents were academics. My father was a professor.
Wow.
So I am a very academic person normally anyway. Well, my upbringing, I guess. And my mother was very academic as well. I A lot of my punishments, apart from being banned from my mom's room, would be, if I was rude to my mom, I'd have to write an essay about rudeness. It was just that sort of,
Wow.
yeah. Same with my dad as well. Like, my dad would make you do it. My mom would read it and she would read the content and speak to you about the content. My father would, first of all, for the first 2 weeks, he would be correcting your grammar, your syntax, all of that, and then get you to write it several times correctly. Your spellings, have you stuck with all American spellings, or are there some American spellings and British spellings? Pick one, that sort of thing. My father was a professor, and then after that, then he talk about the content, to talk to you about the content. But that was the kind of family that I came from. I mean, I haven't sort of gotten my children to do that yet.
that,
and
that must have been such a deterrent. Like, I would have been naughty once and never again.
And never be naughty again. Absolutely. But what I have found out that I have done in the past has been, we'd go on holiday and we'd come back from holiday and I'd say, you know what, write an essay about your holiday, holiday, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you would like to see next time, that sort of a thing. And use, and when my younger one was when she was about 4 or 5 and obviously couldn't really write long sentences, I'd say, no problem, just write 1 or 2 sentences, but use a lot of wow words, like really nice adjectives and that sort of a thing. And and yeah, I think she's probably the more academic of both of my kids. My old child is very, very artistic, and I do encourage that. I'm probably a bit more academic than not, but that's probably because I have no artistic flair whatsoever. Like, nothing.
I don't believe that.
I haven't. Honestly speaking, I haven't. I was the child who found it really hard to color in, within the lines. I have no idea why, but yeah.
But you're artistic in your speech because you can tell a very good story, especially on Facebook.
Well, I can, because I family where I had to write essays, where I had to express myself, in words and that sort of thing. That's probably why.
Yeah. Well, we're benefiting from it.
Thank you very
much. So going into kind of more of the challenges of motherhood, what would you say has been your kind of biggest challenge or darkest moment of motherhood, if you wouldn't mind sharing it with us?
Absolutely. So there's two that stand out. One of them was when my older daughter had to have surgery, and it was quite a sort of invasive surgery. She had to have a surgery on her spine, and it was during the COVID time. It had been sort of put off at the beginning of COVID, but her situation was getting worse, and it had to be done. So I was allowed to stay with her in hospital. And the stay in hospital was fine. We were basically locked up in the hospital. We couldn't really go anywhere. I couldn't go anywhere. I was being fed so that I wouldn't have to go out and buy food and bring COVID back, that sort of a thing. So that was fine. But when we got home, that was when the real challenge started, because I had to sort of sleep in her room. She was quite immobile. I had to sort of put a mattress on the floor in her room and sleep there so that I could give her medication in the middle of the night, because it was there was kind of like a timetable. And then she couldn't turn on her bed either, so I had to sort of turn her so that she wouldn't have bed sores. And it was quite a dark moment for me. And like I said, this sort of happened during the COVID period, so nobody could visit. You could sort of come and help. But we kind of got through it as a family, I'd say. I mean, we had a lot of help from a lot of our friends at church, and our sort of small group, like a home fellowship, and they sort of would cook meals and leave it by the door. So I didn't have to cook all the time, and my kids started to love Ghanaian food, because one of the families that used to cook, they were Ghanaian, so they used to make lovely Ghanaian food, and Ghanaian jollof as well. Horror, because we're Nigerian, right? But anyway, it was fantastic. It was, and we, we needed a lot of pillows, and they were like, no, don't buy pillows. We have loads of pillows and blankets and that sort of a thing. And so that really helped. That helped lift it. And I would sort of wake up in the morning, and I was working from home as well. If you think about it, during the pandemic, and I
Mm,
was, so I would wake up, give my child a bath, and at this time she would have been about 15, 16. So she wasn't a little child. She was,
yeah.
who who really liked her privacy, but obviously couldn't have privacy because I had to give her a wash, or that sort of thing. And I had to help her go to the loo and all of that. That was quite a trying time for me.
Mm,
And her as well. I had to learn patience, because there were times when I would kind of snap, and I wasn't snapping because I was angry at her inability to do things, but just because I was tired. I was physically tired.
yeah.
Um, and then I would have to sort of pull back and say, oh, I'm the only one who can give her a bath. Her dad can't, but he would help
Mm,
with. So I would kind of let him do the other things, and then the things that I had to do, that then I would do those things. But that was a really, really dark moment,
mm,
for the second bit was, I lost my mom during the pandemic as well. So after
mm,
after my daughter's operation, my mom passed. So my daughter's operation was in the October, and my mom died the following year, in March. And
mm.
that was a really dark time for us, because we didn't see it coming. It just sort of happened during the pandemic, and it sort of happened, and I was, at the time, my mom lived in Nigeria, and I was on autopilot. Like, me and my siblings would have these meetings, and to plan the funeral, and I was the only one who was able to go from here. My older sister lives in Australia, and Australia was in the total lockdown, so she couldn't go. My younger brother lives in America, and he caught COVID just before, so he wasn't going to be traveling anywhere. So it was just me and my other siblings who lived in Nigeria who were able to go. But I felt incredibly blessed that I was able to go.
Yeah.
For me, I think losing my mom was a real blow. Like I said, I didn't see it coming. I just kind of wasn't able to function. And
Mm,
I knew very early on that I would need bereavement counselling, and I did seek it. But obviously, they don't offer it to you until like 6 months after.
right.
And so after, I felt that I was coping, but then during the time, I know that my kids, I wasn't the same person that I had been before my mom passed away,
Mm,
and I see that they were trying to get me out of this sort of dark mood, depression, if you like. I was
mhm.
still doing, working, and delivering at work, and doing really well at work, but work was my escapism. And
Mm,
my older daughter would come and say, "Oh, mom, remember you wanted to plant things in the garden? Why don't we do this? And why don't we do that?" And I could see what she was trying to do. I could see that she was
yeah.
trying to get snap out of it. But I always said to myself that I didn't want my kids to feel responsible for my mental health.
Yeah.
So it was a really dark time, and I would just kind of log on to work and work and work, and then I would log off, and I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping properly, and then I would doing a lot of things for escapism. I would watch rubbish videos on YouTube, rubbish Nollywood videos on YouTube and I would watch them in double time, because they I'd watch them in double time, so that I didn't even, it was a brainless activity, but it sort
Yeah.
of out of grieving, if you like. So for me, that was a pretty dark moment as well,
Yeah.
losing. Yeah.
So how did you how did you cope with it? Like, what were the kind of like practical things that you did, and how, because I mean, in those moments, I don't know how people can deal with the grief and still be a mother. So like, how did you, is there anything like that you kind of practically did, or anything that like helped you in that time to cope with
uh,
everything?
yes. So like I said, there was a lot of escapism, and I think psychologists would tell you that it's not a bad thing to, but I
Okay.
think it's not good to sort of stay there forever and ever. So
Yeah.
escapism, and it is fine. But the practical things that I had to do, I was sort of praying more,
Mhm.
and sometimes praying more when I could, and sometimes I would say, I really can't pray today. I guess the prayers that I prayed yesterday or 3 weeks ago are gonna have to sustain me, because it's just not working. But
Yeah.
it was some of that, but I think also it was making a conscious decision to say, right, tonight we're going to have a family dinner, and normally when we sit at the table to have a family dinner, it's a gadget free dinner, so everybody puts away their gadgets, and that's pretty hard for teenagers to do. But
Yeah.
that's basically what our family dinners are like. We put away our gadgets and we talk.
Mm,
It didn't really have to be about anything, serious, but
mm,
um the fact that we were talking and we were doing, other things. Sometimes I'd sort of go out with the girls, and we'd go to Wood Green, shopping center there, and it would be something very, very mundane, like, right, we need a pair of jeans, let's go look for a pair of jeans at Wood Green. And then
mm,
we would, and it wasn't necessarily something that we had to do because you could buy everything online. But once the shops opened, like I said, my mom passed away during lockdown,
yeah,
and so we couldn't really go anywhere, and nobody was coming to the house and all of that. But after we buried her, it sort of eased off a little bit.
mm,
So we'd sort of go places together, and I kind of tried to do more things, especially with the girls, because I didn't want them to feel as though they were losing their mom. And in a lot of ways, I think that they did. And I always think that they probably haven't gotten the same mom that they got before my mom passed away. But
yeah,
and I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing or good thing. It's just a thing. But
yeah,
we need the best out of that situation. We need to make the best out of the mom that I am.
mm,
So yeah, it was making a conscious effort to do things with them.
yeah.
Not how mundane it was, but we were just doing things together.
Yeah, yeah. So how would you say that your kind of journey as a mother and the things that you've experienced whilst being a mother have like shaped your relationship with God?
I think for me, I've kind of learned I've kind of learned to pray more. I've kind of learned
Mm,
to pray more, for the girls as well. Obviously, when I was footloose, fancy free, and it was just me, most of my prayers would have been about me or about other people loosely. But it's sort of made me very, very intentional about praying for them and about praying for the sort of friends that they have and the sort of friendships that they have, and praying that they would have, like, really wholesome friendships. And in a lot of ways, I do see that, those prayers come to pass. I
mm,
do see it happening. I do kind of look back and think, oh my goodness, my daughter's got some really good friends. And girls, and maybe I say this because I grew up in a house where we're predominantly female, and also I've got girls as well, but they have some really good wholesome friendships. I remember when my daughter came out of hospital, and she wasn't allowed. I didn't allow her to eat any junk food at all because I wanted her to eat, wholesome meals, lots of veg, lots of fruit to promote healing and, her
yeah,
immunity, and very immunocompromised when she came out of hospital. But when she was given the go ahead to eat whatever, um, her friends came over and they made her a hamper. It was really nice, but it was full of junk food. They had instant noodles, Haribos, donuts, and she ate like 12 donuts at a sitting and was sick because she'd eaten 12 donuts. But it was that sort of, I just sort of thought, well, that's quite thoughtful of them because they know that these are the sort of things that she likes and she was missing. I mean, even though it wasn't kind of my choice of hamper, but yeah, but they well, and I mean, those are the sort of really wholesome friendships that you pray for your kids to have. And
yeah,
it's maybe pray more as a mother, pray more, very, very, very intently and very intensely as well. Praying
mm,
for with that sort of intensity as well. I sort of learned to do that being a mom.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely finding that the further in the journey I get, the more I'm just like, God, I just don't know what to do. Like, help me.
Yeah, yeah. I get to that point every single time, especially now that they're teenagers. I'm like, God, I really don't know how. I have no idea what I'm doing here. I don't even think I'm winging it successfully. You're gonna have to step in and save the day because you know so it's kind of helped me to look to God more as well,
Yeah,
because otherwise I just kind of wouldn't really know what to do. I'd be lost.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And so what would you say has been like the biggest lesson you've learned in motherhood that you could share? Like you said before, some things like you just can't be prepared for. So you learn it on the job, but actually perhaps if someone had told you before you became a mother, it would have been really helpful to know?
Yeah. I think for me it's been positive. Well, patience is one, but I think positive words, positive affirmation has been
Okay.
a really big one. And we always know that, you should be positive, you should speak to people positively and all of that. And it's everybody knows that and everybody kind of tries to practice it. But when you have teenagers, it is so much harder. It is that much harder because they know everything, obviously, and you're trying them. There's a pit there, you don't want to walk there, and they're being really stubborn. And I know what I'm doing, and they're going to walk into that pit and fall in there. But as a parent, sometimes you have to sort of take a step back, watch them fall into it, and pull them out, and try not to say "I told you so."
Mm.
Um, I've had situations where my teenagers have sort of been in moods, had like really bad mood swings, and would say they and would probably not be speaking to me for like a few days, 3 days, 4 days. And I've had to sort of pull them out of it. And the way that you pull them out of it effectively is by being positive, because they're already defensive. They feel like you're going to tell them off, or you're going to say, they feel like you're going to say something negative, or something that they perceive as negative, tell them
Mm.
off, or tell them they're not good enough. And teenagers always feel like their parents feel they're not good enough. So
Yeah.
you say to them, you're a friggin' rock star. You are. The, and which is I say this quite often, and I say things like, well, the only thing that makes me sad is the fact that you don't realize how much of a rock star that you are. you know
Wow.
it, it's not that I don't, it's not, I think you're good enough, and I think you're even better than I would could ever imagine. What
Wow.
bad is the fact that you don't even realize it. And I've had to sort of tell my daughter the story of the Tower of Babel,
Yeah.
where God, where the Bible says that God looked down and said, man is incredibly powerful. Like, now there's nothing that they set their mind to do that they won't do.
Mm.
And I've said that it just goes to show, really, there's nothing that you set your mind to do that you won't do, or that you
Mm.
can't. And it's telling her that I acknowledge that this is what can happen, and I know that it can happen. So, kind of come to my side and then be positive, and be positive about yourself. It is quite hard. So you've got a daughter and a son, haven't you?
Yep.
I don't know if parenting boys is any easier. Maybe they
Oh,
don't. Maybe
I
I
just
don't know.
think parenting's hard. So.
Yeah, but parenting is hard. Nothing would ever prepare you for it. And I think you forget that at some stage they're going to want to do things by themselves, and they're going to want to be independent. And they're independent, and they don't necessarily have the emotional capacity to be as independent as they want to be.
Yeah.
But they're kind of kicking and fighting. I want to do this by myself. I want to make all my decisions. But one thing that I also learned is, as a mother, is always to trust your instinct. There's
Right.
sometimes my kids have asked me if they could go places, or do stuff, and I just sort of get a witness or a feeling that they shouldn't do it. And I've said no, and I have no qualms in saying no at all. I'm the boring parent. I'm the parent who says no, and I have no. My husband, on the other hand, doesn't, and he says, "Well, the girls are never angry with me." I'm like, "Yeah, that's because you're a prolific sitter on the fence. You can't. If you sit on the fence, they're never going to be angry. I'm the one who has to do the hard work. I'm the one who has to say no." But I have no. I make no bones about saying no. And
Yeah.
most times I say no, and I wouldn't really be able to explain why I'm saying no.
Yeah.
It's just a feeling. And to them, it's just a feeling, does not make any sense, and it makes them angrier. But 10 times out of 10, when I said no, we found out later on that it was the right decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Wow.
put my finger on it. It was kind of like when they lie. Well, one of them kind of tells fibs. The other one just doesn't. And I always say to her, like, I don't know what the full story is, but see, your version is not the truth. And I can't say what it is, but I know that her version is not the truth. And
Yeah.
then obviously after that, but it's that sort of thing with parenting decisions when they're teenagers and they want to go to a party here, or they want to do this or do that. 10 times out of 10, when I've said no, or when I felt uneasy about it,
Mm.
it become obvious much later that it was the right decision to say no.
Wow. That is so powerful. Like, I'm like taking mental notes in my head. That is, yeah, that is so powerful. So in terms of like any other kind of like advice or anything that you'd like to say before we wrap things up that could be helpful to someone starting or in the motherhood journey?
I think for me, you can't sort of reiterate it enough. Positive words of affirmation. I mean, I'm the touchy feely parent. I'm the parent who would say I love you and that sort of a thing. But your kids need to know that you're a soft landing, and wherever they go, they can always come back home, even if they've messed up. And their first thought shouldn't be, "Oh, I've messed up. I need to run away from mom." Their thought should be, I've messed up. I need to go tell mom. I need my mom to help me. Like I said, even though I'm the strict parent, if my kids got into trouble, I'm the parent that they would call. And growing up, that was the same with us, with my mom. We always knew that we could always come back, and it was the unconditional love. We always knew that, always, very important. Sometimes it feels hard when they're being really headstrong and not listening, but above all of it, they should always, you should always sort of make them aware that you're always there, and you are the soft landing, you are the haven, if you like.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so powerful. Thank you so, so much, Louise. I really appreciate just hearing your experiences and you sharing that wisdom with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me as well, Sharon. It's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. I was like, oh wow, Sharon wants me to be on her podcast.